What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate Podcast. That is a part of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Man Cave Podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, like Apple or Spotify. Also available on YouTube, especially if you're watching the video right now. But if you got a few seconds, if you haven't done so already, 5-star review, positive rating, so others can find the podcast. Just how the algorithms work out here. Kind of a little bit of an emergency pod here because the news that the Packers will be releasing Jaire Alexander in a kind of a weird off season, a up and down. I mean, I would love, and we'll never know. I would love to know though exactly what all transpired this offseason, how those conversations went, and just the back and forth between the Packers and Jaire's camp and such. I mean, you go back to January after the playoff loss to the Eagles, you have Jaire in the locker room refusing to talk to members of the media and saying, I don't have anything good to say. I'm probably not going to be here next year anyways. And then you have Goody's comments, especially at the combine, kind of insinuating that, Jaire's probably not going to be back. And then there's no trade, there's no release, all off season. And then, just a couple weeks ago, we hear that there's probably maybe a reconciliation going on, and that the Packers have offered a restructured deal to Jaire Alexander, and that there was a report that Jaire wanted to stay in Green Bay. So it felt like, okay, maybe Jaire's going to be back. And, at first I thought, no way Jaire was going to be back. I got called out for it. Then I thought he was going to be back based off the latest reports. And then it finds out that today, June 9th, he's not coming back, and then got called out for thinking he was going to be back. So I guess you can't win either way on that one. But it was definitely just, I can't, the up and downs of this offseason about he's going to be gone. No, he's coming back. Now he's officially going to be gone and such. It was just, I can't think of another situation very similar to that. So, from a football sense, if we're talking about just on the field, it to me now, let's start off looking at the secondary. No Jaire on the field. I think still there's question marks surrounding the cornerback position. You have Keyshawn Nixon, you have Nate Hobbs, you have Carrington Valentine as your top three. Javon Bullard's probably going to play a lot of that slot nickel role too, along with some duties at the safety spot. After that, you kind of look at the depth of the Packers cornerback group. Kalen King, who, I was intrigued with him last year as a 7th-round pick. A lot of Packers fans were intrigued with him. We didn't get to really see him at all last year. So it's one thing to be intrigued about the potential with him. It's another thing to say, okay, yeah, we get to see the Kalen King here. We don't know what he's going to be like. We won't know until he actually gets on the field. So I think let's just pump the brakes a little bit on the Kalen King. I'm not saying anybody's like, oh, he's the next Sam Shields or Tramon Williams or anybody like that, but let's just lower the expectations here a little bit because we just don't know what to expect from him. Same with Kamal Hayden. Formerly was a 6th-round pick in the 2024 draft. We don't know what to expect from these guys. But it's also fair to say, all right, they're next up. They're the depth because we are an injury away from Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, or Nate Hobbs from one of those guys be the next man up. So that to me, it paints a big question mark surrounding the depth of this cornerback group, especially since Green Bay didn't, go in the draft and target a corner early on. Micah Robinson was a late round pick, day 3 pick. So I know Green Bay historically has had some success with these guys. Tramon Williams was an undrafted free agent coming out of the Texans, and Packers picked him up. He developed a nice career. Sam Shields was a 7th rounder. Rookie year, Packers Super Bowl. So, I mean, they have history with that. Carrington Valentine's a late pick, too. Doesn't mean it's always going to work out that way. So I'm a little apprehensive. I'm a little cautious. I like the potential of a Kalen King that he brings. I'm just a little cautious about about Keyshawn potentially being the number 1 corner, about Carrington Valentine being a top 2 corner. Can Hobbs play the outside after primarily playing in nickel slot role in the Raiders organization? Plus, he's been banged up throughout his career. Raiders fans love him. The Raiders liked him. It's just been injuries have been an issue throughout his career too. So for me, there's issues now with depth, right? Or question marks surrounding the depth of the cornerback position for the Packers. But I understand moving on from Jaire because, especially at that price tag, you want availability. Jeff Hafley, how many times last year in his defense had to switch up how he called games because of who was available in the secondary, whether it was Jaire missing time or maybe Evan Williams at safety was missing time, and then you're moving guys all around. He was put into a tough spot a lot of times with his secondary play because of the injuries and moving guys in different spots. So, considering Jaire, this is straight up, an availability issue when it comes to Jaire Alexander. It is straight up 100% availability. If he was out there, playing double-digit games every single year, I think he's still there in Green Bay. But it feels like there was more going beneath the surface too. It just felt like there was something brewing here, and finally it got to a point where both sides just had to kind of separate. That it was probably better to break up. We heard Xavier McKinney was talking to him every day. Derek Ansley Jr. was talking to him every day. And that kind of fed into like, okay, he's actually going to be back. Maybe he's going to be back. But it feels like there's just some babble. Like, I get that there's Packers fans frustrated that Green Bay didn't get anything in a trade. I would have preferred something in a trade too. I would have preferred something in return. But even though he didn't really have a no trade clause, Jaire kind of had a no trade clause because there wasn't a team. If there was a team that was willing to take on his contract as it was, he would have been traded. There obviously was not a team that was willing to take on Jaire Alexander, to trade for Jaire Alexander, not even trade a 7th round pick for Jaire Alexander to take on that full contract. There wasn't, because I think we're at this point. If there was a team even for next year's draft saying, hey, we'll take on his full deal and we'll send you a future 7th round pick, Goody would have taken that. But the fact that we didn't get that tells you nobody was willing to trade. Nobody was willing to trade for Jaire because of that contract, because of his availability. If he had played double-digit games and we were still here that Green Bay was trying to trade him, there would have been teams more likely to trade a pick for him and take on that cap hit. There's no question about that. But the fact that he has been injured these last few years, unavailable to play, and with that huge cap hit, no team was willing to do that. So I get where Packers fans are upset about Green Bay not getting a pick in return, but play it from the other side too. Would you have been willing as a team to acquire Jaire without restructuring his deal? Because Jaire didn't have to. Nobody could force Jaire to restructure it. Would you have been willing to take on that full deal and send a draft pick for Jaire? Not a lot of teams wouldn't have been. And in this case, no team was willing to do that. Unless maybe a division team was willing to do that and Green Bay didn't want to send him to a division team. I don't know. So I understand where, like, I would have liked to pick in return. But obviously there was nobody willing to do that. And I'm one too that I have said on record many times that I thought Goody played this perfectly. And that was to the mindset that I thought that Jaire was coming back. And you look at this now and it's like, well, he's not coming back. So first thing, I still don't knock Goody on how he handled this at all. Because I think he had a certain, it sounds like there were trades in the works and that they had deals in place. So he was trying that. But Jaire was unwilling to adjust his contract. And with him unwilling to adjust his contract, teams weren't willing to make that trade. What is Goody supposed to do at that point? So then what does Goody do? Let's try to reconcile this. Let's try a restructured contract. Let's bring you back for another year. He tried that. Jaire apparently turned that down too. So I feel like Goody's hands were tied. He tried trading him. Jaire wouldn't adjust his contract. No teams were willing to do that. All right, let's keep you on board. Let's find a middle ground with a incentive-heavy contract where he could still make all that money, potentially even more possibly, if you hit these marks. Jaire didn't want to do that. What else is left at this point other than keeping him on your roster for that huge cap hit or moving on from him and just separating it and move? And you know what? Maybe it's best for both sides. And then in turn, you get some cap space available for this year. I just feel like Goody's hands were tied because it sure seems like Jaire was unwilling to work with the Packers to, one, facilitate a trade to somewhere, two, to stay in Green Bay with a restructured contract. Jaire obviously feels like he can make more on the open market, but I also feel like part of this was in play because Jaire wanted to choose his destination, that he's got certain teams in mind that he wants to go to. I'm sure his agent, his representatives have probably done some back channel talking with some of these teams and said, "Hey, if Jaire were available, would you be interested in him?" And I'm sure they know the teams that would be interested in him. So Jaire and his team didn't help out Goody, didn't do any favors to Green Bay. So to me now, it paints a picture, or it paints a question mark surrounding the depth of this cornerback position. I don't know if they signed a veteran. Rasul Douglas is out there, but he's 31 years old. Can he play on the outside with that? Does he have the speed to play on the outside? I don't know anymore. Asante Samuel Jr. is going to be the name that every Packers fan throws out there. He's 25 years old. He's got the name, and I understand that. But what scouts say, what insiders say, he can't play man versus man, and he struggles to tackle. He's got playmaking ability, but he can't play man versus man, and he can't tackle. Two things that Packers fans have constantly said over the years they want better from their corners. Yet you want Asante Samuel. That doesn't make sense to me. You want your corners to tackle better, and you want them to play man on man. But you want Asante Samuel. He doesn't do that. He's better as a zone defender. If you bring him in for a 1-year prove-it deal, I've got no problem with that. A 1-year cheap deal, I got no problem with that. But let's also remember, this is June 9th. He's 25, and he's still available as a free agent. That should tell you something. I know he's coming off of a shoulder injury, but there's more to it too, where the other teams view him in that same light. Hilton's out there. He's primarily a slot nickel role. Packers have plenty of those. I don't think they bring in a veteran. I'm not saying I'm not opposed to it. A 1-year prove-it deal for some of these guys. Depth is a good thing. I always want some depth. There's always the question mark of, like, is it good depth? And I don't know if they would have good depth if they brought in one of those corners. So get ready for, I think, a very, very intriguing season with this secondary group. And I think, too, it puts a lot more pressure on that pass rushing group. That pass rushing group better perform better and better be able to get after that quarterback. They want to only rush with 4, 5 guys. That group better get home with that, because right now, Green Bay cannot afford to send a corner blitz, a safety blitz. They need to drop as many players back in coverage as possible. So then, finally now, okay, Green Bay's got $17 million in cap space. I know there's some people saying, why did they release him earlier? Couldn't the Packers have gotten more cap space if they would have done it earlier? No. Remember, it's the post-June 1st. We hear that a lot. A lot of players may be released in March, but with a post-June 1st designation. What that means is the dead cap hit with a post-June 1st designation, you get a little bit of a cap hit this year and a little bit of a cap hit the following year. That cap hit gets divided. So that means you get more cap space this year. The only thing is, when teams do that in March, April, you carry the cap hit, that player's cap hit, the current one, until June 1st. Then you get a little bit of a alleviation from the cap space after June 1st. So yes, we hear teams doing post June 1st releases in April and March, but you don't get that relief for this year's cap space until June 2nd. Well, it's June 9th, so obviously it's a post June 1st release. So technically the Packers get more cap space available for 2025. A little bit of a dead cap hit this year and a little bit of a dead cap hit next year, as opposed to all the dead cap hit for this season. If they would have done all of a dead cap hit this season, they would have had about $7 million available in cap space, extra cap space available. But they've got about $17 million extra cap space. So they could go about this a couple different ways. They could work on some extensions and take some of that cap hit on this year's cap space. I'm looking at Zach Tom, Quay Walker. Maybe they do something with Elton Jenkins' contract to make him a little bit healthier. but they could do some contract extensions and take some of that cap hit on this space. The other part, remember, cap spaces can roll over. So whatever they have left over from their cap space this year, they can roll over into 2026, which if you remember, because we've mentioned it many times, the Packers 2026 cap space, not in a great position. It's not in a great position. So they may be looking for some more funds somehow, some way. Those are the couple different ways they could use this extra cap space. But to sum it all up, to wrap up this episode, no Jaire. I don't know how this is going to work out depth-wise. I hope Keyshawn Nixon takes a step up. I hope Carrington Valentine takes a step up. I hope Nate Hobbs shows that he can play the outside along with the slot corner too. I hope he shows that versatility. I hope we're okay there. Green Bay wants to play a style of defense where they have extra defenders in the back, coverage guys, and being able to rush the passer up front. This puts more pressure on them to do that this year with that pass rush. But if they're an injury away, you're talking about a couple of second-year guys who were day 3 picks that are going to be asked to step up their roles big time. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. It definitely takes a little bit of hit. I thought Jaire was coming back. I'm like, okay, secondary's in a really good spot. It takes a hit now. It takes a hit. And it puts more pressure on Jeff Hafley as the play caller. It puts more pressure on these guys like Keyshawn Nixon and Carrington Valentine and Nate Hobbs to up their game up another level. And it puts more pressure on that pass rush to really up their level. We'll see how it all plays out this upcoming season. And the thing is, we're not going to know until September when the games start. That's going to do it for us on this episode of the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate Podcast as part of the Man Cave Podcast. Again, don't forget to follow and subscribe to both the Man Cave Podcast and the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate Podcast, wherever you find your podcasts.